which Mooney is this?
This is an M20E,
M20E?
65 M20E.
So is this the short body, the medium? Short.
The short ones are the C's and the E's. Those are the earliest versions, and then they get longer with that. But for now, we're just talking about these E's.
So what makes this a medium body or a short body?
This is the short body. It's 6 inches shorter than the G and the F. The G and the F are the next models above this. So you have a C, stretch it and you get a G. You have an E, and you stretch it and you get an F. And the stretch is 9 inches. So this is an M20E. These have 200 horsepower fuel-injected IO 360 light combing zone.
Okay.
And the C is a 180 horsepower carbureted O 360 light combing, both with 2,000 hour TDO.
That's excellent. 2,000 hours. That's a long time. That's a lot of fun. Well, I know that these had something with the prop.
Prop AD, big deal, yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So some of them, this is a scimitar. I don't know if you can see it on the curve of the blade here. This is like the ultimate replacement. This fixes the AD and it's gone forever. But if you have the normal prop on a C or an E or an F or a G, they have an AD on their hub. And if they, every 100 hours, you have to have an eddy current test checked on it. And if it fails through having a little crack or something in it, you get a new prop. But every 100 hours, you've got to take the prop either on the plane to the prop shop or send it in and have the prop eddy current checked. So if you're buying one of these, it's good to get one with a suffix B hub, which means it's the old prop that doesn't have the AD, or just a completely new prop, which is this scimitar version with a slightly more curved leading edge.
And who makes a scimitar?
I think these are half.
Something else I noticed, compared to the C's and the B's, the spinner's different, isn't it?
It is. With this prop STC, you get a longer, pointier spinner. The original propeller that goes with this is a bullet-like dome. It looks more like a classic plane. So this modernizes it a bit and gives it a bit more length.
And then down here, is this blocked off, or does this ram air induction work?
That is the ram air induction. That will allow air to go in 140 knots in cruise, and will give you an inch of manifold pressure for free without having a turbo. And you operate it simply in cruise by pulling open a knob on the dash. It opens a flap, it goes straight in, bypassing the air filter.
So you don't want to use it down low where there's bugs, debris.
Or when you land it. If
Okay.
you put the gear down, the light will come on to warn you to close it, in case you land and there's dust, and the dust will be out of repair.
Was this broken, or?
No, that is
hanging
a
around?
bulge, literally, that allows the IO 360 Lycoming to fit under the cowling where the O 360 was designed to go in the sea. So in E, you can see the two power bulges, one on each side, and then down here, where the chin is, there's no air filter box. So it's a flush chin on an E, and it's got a box for a C.
I heard you could break your gear, or at least dent it, or something like that.
If you oversteer them on the ground, there's a stationary tube like this, or tube, and then there's the moving part with the nose wheel. And if one tube hits the other tube at 90 degrees, they have a very high pressure point because they're both hollow.
Right.
If you oversteer it mechanically with a tugger on the ground, they will bend, or they'll get a dent. And if they are bent, you've got to replace that part of the nose wheel. So if you're buying one of these, make sure that it doesn't have the oversteer dent on the front trunnion.
This looks different from the 201 we looked at before. As far as the window goes, this is very steep.
It is. The C's and the E's, the short ones, and then the F's and the G's, the middle and early 60s planes, they have a very vertical windshield, and they have it, and it ends, it starts low, it doesn't go up as high as the 201, and it doesn't stick out as far here either. You can put the 201 windshield in these planes. It costs $5,000 and it gives you 5 knots. So, but the beauty of this is avionics by access. Cowling off, this off, you're standing here working on the radios without lying on your back on the floor with your feet in the headlight. So that is actually a nice thing to have on it. And if you think about it, for the price of a 172 or less, you're buying a plane that's high performance, fuel injected, retractable, that does 160 knots.
How fast?
This will, I mean, Mooney owners always like to proclaim that they all do 200 miles an hour in every direction. An M20E at 10,000 feet does about 150 knots and burns 9 gallons an hour. That's the honest number. And then the myth is that they're hard to slow down, they're hard to land.
Right.
If you plan your descent and arrive in the pattern of the right altitude and manage your speed correctly, this plane will land at 55 knots. The book says higher than that for safety margins, but it's capable of doing that.
Well, that's your touchdown speed, right?
Yeah.
With the tires
Right at
touching
the last
the
minute,
asphalt.
touching down. But if you're landing at 80, it's going to float, it's going to pause, it's going to skid, it's trying to fly. So they're actually far more docile at low airspeeds than a lot of people give them credit for. So another thing that's very interesting about Mooney's that I don't think we've talked about in any of the videos is this is a one-piece wing. You can't take one wing off a Mooney like you can off a Piper or a Beech or a Cessna. It's one piece and the fuselage sits on it. And it's 36 feet wide and 22 feet long, so it's very wing.
So without connecting to the fuselage like most other aircraft do, is this plane stronger?
Oh yeah, it's 11 Gs.
11 Gs.
I heard a story in the 70s when the French were buying Mooney. They wanted proof that it was as strong as they said. So they got a wing and they pushed down on the tip and up on the middle and broke it at 11 Gs.
Wow.
Which is a human breaks at about 6. So they're very, very strong. No control cables. All push rods.
All push rods.
All push rods.
Wing, tail, everything?
There's no cables in them. Now, you could theoretically remove an aileron and you'd still fly the plane because the other rod would pull and push.
Impressive.
Wouldn't want to try it. But yeah, they're one-piece wing. The fuselage sits down inside the wings. Trimmable tail, steel frame, tubular structure inside the fuselage.
So you're in a roll cage.
There's a lot of things about Moonies that are really, really beneficial. Not a lot of people understand. And it can be confusing because what year are you buying? What model are you buying? Is it a C, is it an F? Why do I be 65 gallons, 50 gallons, and 88 gallons?
Is it a long body, a short body? Why did they make it this way? Why is this the upgrade?
So all these videos we're doing are going to be showing all the differences between all the years and all the models of the planes to try and get rid of that confusion. And another thing that's interesting about them is because there is a hierarchy, C's, E's, G's, F's, got to get them in the right order, J's, K's, M's. If you buy a golden E and you pay too much for it, you've gone into the price bracket of an F. And conversely, if you buy an F that's got every mod in the world done on it, and you're paying the price of a J at 201 with all its 201 features on it,
right,
you may as well buy the J. So Moonies are kept in a trading range according to their model because they're suppressed by the one above it.
Wow.
So that is why a C and an E is probably the biggest bang for the buck you can buy because they're kept down by the Fs and the Js and the Ks and the turbo things.
You mentioned before you had 50, there were 65, 80 gallons. What is this one?
This is 50 gallons with 48 usable. So 50 gallons at 9 gallons an hour, if you have to push it, there's 5 hours in it of fuel. If this was an F, which is the slightly longer version, fuel injected, it has 65 gallons.
65.
Like a J. 201 Js have 65. That's 6 hours. The G, on the other hand, which is the stretched C model, with 180 horse, it only has 50. So the F and the G, although they're the same airframe, one has 50, one has 65. So, but to be honest with you, 5 hours is pretty long range. It's not really a sort of short range Mooney. The Mooney TLS Bravo has 88 gallons.
Is this eligible for a Monroy conversion if you wanted to?
You could.
Now, how many gallons is in the Monroy?
105.
105 gallons with the Monroy conversion.
And that would keep that plane in the air for about 11 hours. But that's for somebody that really doesn't want to have to land. I mean, at 50, you're never going to feel short at 50.
Right.
And at 65 in the 201s, but some people will, if you put in a bigger engine, like if you do a rocket conversion STC, which is a 520 engine in a 231, so you get a medium length 231 with an LB engine in it, which isn't a particularly good engine, and you put in a rocket 520, TSIO 520 NB out of a Cessna 340, with its full feathering de-ice 3-blade on it as part of the STC, and Monroy fuel tanks. Now you're going to be burning more like 15, 16 gallons an hour, and suddenly your 65 gallons doesn't seem so good. So that's when somebody would add the Monroy tanks. And that makes a very fast high-altitude cross-country plane, but it's the mid-length fuselage. The Ovation, which is its factory competition, is the long fuselage, and so is the TLS Bravo. We've got one here.
I think we just did a video on that as well.
Yeah, so if you want to know more about the TLS, there's a video on it. But those planes are the long fuselage. The rocket is a turbocharged 231 with a 520 in it, and the missile is a non-turbo 550 powered 201, which if you don't need the turbo altitudes, but you just want raw power, you buy a missile. And actually you have to go out and use, they don't do that STC anymore because the conversion costs more than the plane. These airplanes, the fuselage hits the wing at 90 degrees, not particularly aerodynamic. So you can modify that, but that's just one of the features of the early planes. The later ones are all fared in and much more aerodynamically sleek. I'm sure you can see that right here. The gear doors on the later planes, there's one on the early planes like this, and on the later planes there's two. And it just means it's more aerodynamic with the wheels up, you're not dragging that wheel well through the air.
Tell me a little bit more about the lengths of different Moonies and how you can identify them.
So the first contact when you're looking at a Mooney on the ramp, first thing is it's a Mooney, it's tilted backwards. But if you're looking at the window configurations, if this was a 64 or older, back to 61, this window is like a D shape.
So more of this curved.
Much more curved, yeah. And a little bit humpy looking, and it makes it look short. 65 and newer have the square rectangular windows, and that's much more cosmetically appealing. The F is stretched with a partition in it, and then the J is stretched without the partition in it, and then the long Moonies from the later MSEs, the 201s, the Bravos, Ovations, they are a very long window, but have curved corners. Not all the windows are curved at the corners to give it a more sort of sleek, pressurized. But they are pressurized. But the reason for the stretching isn't just for the humans and the comfort of the baggage. The reason for the stretching is you're putting a bigger engine in the front.
Oh, you need more counterweight.
So you need the tail further away.
Right, that makes sense.
And what's actually nice about that is when the tail's further away, you've got a much better feel. Those big, heavy, late model Moonies are actually really nice to fly and land because they're long, they're much more sedate, they're much more solid feel. This over the Sierras at 14,000 feet is you're buzzing along, it's 200 horsepower, you're at its max work. If you're in a turbocharged big M, like an M20 Bravo, an M20M Bravo, that at altitude is just rock solid. And when you're landing it, you've got huge elevator authority, the length of the fuselage, the distance of the nose wheel from the mains, everything makes them feel really solid. So pop that baggage door.
Okay.
Just hold it up and then go latch. The reason that's up there and not on the side like a Cherokee is because inside the fuselage, down below where Kerry's holding it open, through here, under the door, up around the windshield frame, down the middle of the window, and down inside here, there's a steel tubular frame, like a space frame in a race car. So you can't have the baggage door in the middle of that because it would cut the strength, so you have it above, which makes it actually very easy to load. You've got to be careful how you close them though. If you slam that thing, the pins will hit the frame. So always make sure the handle's up, and then you close it nicely, you never slam it. You just shut it like that. Very similar to this. The door, operate, open, close, do not slam.
The flap system is relatively unique as compared to other aircraft which typically have either an electric flap system or a Johnson bar, such as an old 172 or an older 182, or a lot of your Pipers.
Or the Skywagons.
Or Skywagons. This flap system is hydraulic.
So the way it works is you've got a little flap indicator right here, like a little flap, and you just push that down, and all that's done is it's closed the hydraulic system for the flaps. Then there's this lever, and you just pump it. And each pump will give you a certain amount of flaps going down until you're at full flaps, which is probably 5. On this plane 6, it can be 4 to 6 pumps, that's full flaps. Then you land, and then you put the flaps up, and all you've done there is open the hydraulics so the hydraulic fluid bleeds back into the reservoir and the flaps go up and around.
Say you don't have a flap indication for the takeoff position flaps. How would you figure out what the flaps need to be?
The aileron deflection is 20 degrees. So if you wanted 20 degrees, you'd match it to your aileron. And that's similar with a lot of other planes. Generally, for a Mooney, some people use no flaps at all. In this plane, I use a pump and a half, but it's generally a pump. So just before takeoff, you do 1.5, takeoff, flaps up. Very reliable system. And the hydraulic reservoir for the flaps is staggered in the belly on the brake hydraulic reservoir. So if your flaps fail and you're pumping and they're not working and there is no flap, you've got about an hour and a half before you've got no brakes. Then this plane, everybody talks about the gear, the manual gear.
Right.
This plane doesn't have it. Well, the 65Es would have it. There'd be a big lever right here, and you'd unlatch it. And we'll show you in a different video, but this was converted when it was new back at Clairville to electric gear. So it's literally gear up, gear down, and then there's a backup system here, which you would then manually wind up and wind down if you need that.
Now with the non-manual gear planes such as this one, I remember hearing something about there was a 20-to-1 and a 40-to-1 ratio for the worm drive for the gear.
There is. There's a high-speed motor and then there's a low-speed motor. The high-speed motor is so violent, you actuate the gear and the wheels are like bang up. And over a period of time, you can imagine how that would wear it out and all likely to fail.
Right.
So when I bought this, it had that in it, and I took it and had the low speed motor put in, so it's much more sedate. It's like, and it's what the 201s and the electric Fs and all the later planes have. You don't see many of them. It's called an M20D, and a D is a fixed geared C, which you learn in.
The D is a fixed geared Mooney?
Yeah, so your gear is fixed, you learn in it, it's cheap to own, maintain, insure and learn. Then, once you've learned, you get a kit from Mooney that converts it to a C. So you'll see some Moonies is M20D, and you think, what's the difference? There is no difference between a D and a C, except that D used to be fixed gear. To insure, fixed gear when you're learning,
Right.
you insure it, you learn in it, you get your time in it, and then you get the kit and you make it into a retractable. So the other legend you always hear, Moonies are small. Well, they are a little bit small, but they're no smaller than a Cherokee, they're no smaller than a Warrior, an Archer, an Arrow. They have a short door. The Piper door is probably that much longer, so there's a feel of getting in and out of a bigger cabin in a Piper. But this width in a Warrior, Cherokee 140, Archer, all of them is the same as in a Mooney. And my argument is, you're not in a Mooney long enough to get uncomfortable. You can't buy a later model, a faster, a bigger engine Mooney and get a bigger cabin. They're all this size. So, you know,
That width.
Yeah, exactly this diameter here, this cross section is the same.
So even it stays the same for the short, the medium, and the long
Yeah,
ones.
they just get longer that way, they don't get any wider this way.
Okay.
They're getting in and out of the Mooney.
Is there a way to do this the right way, or is there?
You can pile out undignifiedly onto the wing and make do, or the way to everybody peel out in is the seat's forward, the back people are out, very easy. The front person, which would be like that, because they're here. So they're out, and then the back people are out. Then you just slide back this seat, slide back this seat, and you two just get out like this. People say they're small, and then the legend perpetuates itself. But a Mooney is no smaller than a Cherokee, bottom line. But this versus a 50 grand Cherokee 180, same engine.
Mm-hmm.
One is doing 105 knots, the other is doing 150 knots, the same gallons per hour, the same useful load.
So you have this.
Exactly.
All right, now that we're back here at the back end of the plane, can you tell me a little bit about the tails of Moonies?
Well, they're legendary.
Are they? Why?
Oh, you mean tails? So the main thing that's obviously noticeable is the tail's on backwards. It's vertical, it's straight against the leading edge rather than sloped like a tail. The reason for that is theoretically that if the leading edge is forward in a stall spin scenario, it's more likely to recover sooner because it's reaching forward into the unstalled air. That's what Al Mooney's thinking was when he designed it. But the whole tail moves when you trim it.
Does it?
When you wind the trim, the entire, and on another video you'll see this on a plane where we actually move it on an F model, the entire tail does this, vertical and horizontal trimming. The whole thing moves, and that means there's no need for a trim tab. And if there's no need for a trim tab, there's no drag, it's faster, it's more efficient, the whole thing is about aerodynamics.
Yeah, these planes seem to be 100% driven by efficiency.
Aerodynamics, they want it to be. That's why they're small, because they're efficient. The skins on the elevator and horizontal stabilizer are flat, not like in the later planes where they have these flutes in them. You'll see these like recessed parts of this. So those flutes reduce suction as the air comes off the tail to reduce drag, to increase speed. This plane doesn't have that, but it does have this handy pen holder.
Well, it's got a pen holder back there.
It looks exactly like a pen holder. It's a tube and it's riveted on here. I don't know why they put it on, but the theory behind it is that the airflow coming off the tail is broken as it comes off, reducing suction. Ask me about why the rudder's short.
Hey, Mark, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Why is the rudder so short?
Well, on a C and an E, the rudder ends here.
Oh, that's right.
On an F and a G and all other Mooneys, it ends right down here. And the theory behind it is that these planes are supposed to wag, inflate. You know, people say that a Mooney in turbulence will just give a little bit of this. And you can correct it with a bit of rudder and stop it. But to prevent that, they lengthened the rudder in the longer fuselage planes, and they got rid of that problem. But to be honest, I've had C's, I've had E's, and yeah, they wag just like any other plane too. So it's not a big deal. But that is another big identifiable feature of whether it's an E or a C or an A or an E or an F or a G or an N. So interestingly, you can put an ADS-B tail beacon in a C or an E much more easily than you can in the newer planes because you're not putting it into a control surface.
Down here, we've got the gear, the main gear, and it looks a little bit off to me. Why is that?
The optical illusion on a Mooney is that the gear looks like it's leaning in, but it's partly dihedral and it partly isn't exactly vertical. But so if you see one, and also from that camera angle, you can see that the nose gear doors aren't straight either.
Right.
One's a bit further in, and that's so because one has to close before the other one. So that's normal too.
So they kind of come in like that, they overlap.
Yeah. But on these old planes, and we've talked about it before in different videos, but it's worth going over, there should be 4 discs on the mains and 3 on the nose wheels, those rubber discs. They cost about $100 a piece. You replace them every 10 years or so, but that is the suspension. And if you look at an early 60s Mooney M20E or the the C's even, all of them, if they have 5 discs, those are original. Those are 50 years old. They're solid. And if they're solid, there's no suspension. If there's no suspension, you'll get shock loads into your wing. And if you get shock loads into your wing, you get cracks in the fuel tank sealant, and then you get leaks.
Tell me a little bit about that. You mentioned fuel tank sealant. These aren't bladdered, are they?
No bladders. The fuel is right there under that skin.
Wow.
So it's a wet wing, and it's literally the bay of the tank is sealed with a sealant on the inside of the skin of the plane, and no bladder, no tank, no nothing. If you drill a hole in it, all the fuel would come out. So you must maintain your gear to avoid it getting harsh, so that hard landings don't shock the sealant, which will crack the fuel tank sealant and leak. So if somebody is chasing leaks all the time on the Mooney and complaining about it being leaky all the time, they're either landing it hard, pilot error, or it's got extremely stiff gear and high tire pressure, so the shock loading is cracking the sealant.
Mark, can you tell me a little bit about the front end of this E? Now, it looks identical to me to a C, but there must be something that's
There
different.
is. There's a couple of things that give it away, but C's and E's are very, very similar planes. First thing is, this air filter on a C is a visible box that sticks out, and there's no ram air induction door. That's a big giveaway. Then on top, on the cowling, these dents from the inside out, these bumps, they look like repair. Those are actually bumps to allow the valve cover of the IO360 Lycoming that's in, the 200 horse angle valve versus the 180 horse flat valve engines, which are carbureted in the C's. So to accommodate the injected engine, you have to have this bulb. So if you look at a plane from a distance and you see bulges and a smooth chin, it's
That's an
an
E.
And if it's got a bit of a stretch to it, it's an F.